Deep in the unmapped expanse of Papua New Guinea's Agaiambo swamp, the water is chest-deep and suffocatingly still. For decades, indigenous tribes spoke rumors of a massive metallic structure hidden in the razor-sharp sawgrass. In 1972, an Australian Air Force helicopter flying low over the canopy finally caught a glint of aluminum. Beneath them, sitting perfectly level in the primordial mud, was an American B-17 Flying Fortress. Its four immense propellers were bent from impact, but the cockpit glass was intact. The .50 caliber machine guns still pointed out into the dense tree line. The coffee thermoses were still secured inside, but the 9 men who were supposed to be operating this machine had vanished. In the winter of 1942, this bomber was forced down into one of the most hostile malarial environments on Earth. What remains is a pristine technological relic, sitting in the suffocating heat for over half a century. It is an artifact sealed in a green darkness that was never supposed to be broken. It was the midnight of February 22, 1942. A lone B-17E bomber, designated 412446, flew deep into Japanese-controlled airspace. Captain Fred Eaton and his 8-man crew were targeting the heavily defended harbor at Rabaul. They never even saw the drop zone. Thick clouds obscured the target, forcing them to circle in the dark. When the clouds finally broke, the enemy was waiting. Anti-aircraft flak and fighter interceptors tore through the thin aluminum skin. A Japanese round punctured the right wing, leaking precious fuel into the freezing high-altitude wind. The crew fought to keep the machine airborne, limping south toward the Owen Stanley mountain range. These jagged peaks stretched for hundreds of miles, forming a wall of rock they could not climb. The fuel gauges dropped toward empty. Eaton knew they would never reach their base at Port Moresby. Looking down through the cockpit glass, he spotted a wide, flat expanse of pale green. From 10,000 feet, it looked like a pristine meadow, perfectly smooth and endlessly long. It was a mirage of safety, sitting exactly where they needed it. Eaton made the call to bring the crippled fortress down. The 4 immense engines, starved of fuel, began to sputter and fail. The massive bomber dropped toward the canopy, bracing for a hard landing on a flat field. As the green canopy rushed up to meet the glass, they were not descending toward solid earth. The impact did not shatter the aircraft against solid ground. Instead, the heavy 4-engine bomber plunged directly into chest-deep water, tearing through towering sawgrass. The 4 steel propellers bent backward as the belly slammed into the deep mud, bringing the fortress to a jarring halt. Inside the shattered cockpit, Captain Eaton and his crew braced for a detonation. But the fuel tanks were entirely empty. There was no fire. Against all odds, all 9 men had survived the landing without a single major injury. But as the thunderous roar of the engines finally faded, a chilling new sound replaced it. The dark, murky water of the Agaiambo swamp began rushing through the damaged bomb bay doors. It flooded the lower radio room, rising steadily over their heavy leather flight boots. The crew scrambled to evacuate. As they pulled themselves out onto the silver aluminum wings, they were hit by a wall of absolute suffocating jungle heat. The smooth, pale meadow Eaton had seen from the sky was a fatal illusion. They had driven their advanced machine into a prehistoric, malarial mire. The chest-deep water stretching in every direction was completely opaque, teeming with leeches. The B-17 was slowly settling into the deep mud, but it remained the only piece of dry ground for miles. They were entirely hidden beneath a dense, unbroken canopy, erased from the map of the Pacific. As the sun began to sink below the sharp grass, the stifling air filled with millions of disease-carrying mosquitoes. The 9 aviators stood stranded on the wet metal, staring out into a vast, inescapable green darkness. They had survived the drop from the sky, but the only dry surface keeping them alive was already disappearing beneath the mud. The first night on the sinking wings was an exercise in pure physical endurance. As the sun disappeared behind the thick jungle canopy, the temperature plummeted. The suffocating heat of the day was replaced by a freezing, damp chill. Millions of malarial mosquitoes rose from the stagnant water, swarming the stranded crew in the pitch black. Inside the flooded cabin, the dark water continued its slow, steady climb. The men gathered their few remaining supplies, leaving behind half-smoked cigarettes and coffee thermoses still locked in their brackets. The massive B-17 was slowly settling into the deep mud. By the second dawn, the murky water was cresting over the interior floorboards. Waiting on the wings for a rescue party was no longer an option. They were completely hidden beneath the dense, unbroken tree line. No search plane would ever see them, and the bomber would soon be fully submerged. They had to abandon the only piece of dry metal in the entire swamp. The crew began stripping the dying fortress, salvaging anything that could keep them alive. They deliberately abandoned the heavy .50 caliber machine guns, leaving them locked in their turrets to save weight. They salvaged the compass, their sidearms, and a few surviving rations, but they had no map of the Agaiambo mire. They had no idea where the nearest solid ground might be. Eaton made the final, devastating call. It was finally time to leave the ship. One by one, the 9 aviators slid off the silver aluminum wings. They waded waist deep into the dark, leech-infested water. They began a slow, grueling march through the razor-sharp grass, leaving their perfectly preserved machine to the jungle. They were walking blind into a prehistoric green maze, with absolutely no guarantee of solid land ahead. The 9 aviators pushed blindly into the unmapped Agaiambo swamp. Every step required hacking through towering, razor-sharp sawgrass. The chest-deep water was completely opaque, hiding submerged roots and deep mud. Within days, the physical toll became severe. Their heavy leather flight boots rotted in the stagnant water. Malarial fevers began to set in, ravaging their exhausted bodies. They were starving, burning thousands of calories just to move a few hundred yards. For nearly 2 weeks, they waded through the suffocating green maze without seeing dry land. Then, a sudden break in their isolation. They encountered a group of indigenous Papuans moving through the deep grass in dugout canoes. These locals navigated the treacherous mire with ease. They guided the starving American crew, leading them out of the chest-deep water. The grueling journey from the crash site lasted 36 days. Against all statistical odds, every member of the crew survived the trek. They finally reached the safety of a resident magistrate's post. Captain Eaton had brought his men out of the green abyss, but their survival required leaving the ship entirely behind. The massive 4-engine bomber was now completely isolated. For 30 years, the Agaiambo swamp swallowed the B-17 entirely. The dense canopy closed over the silver aluminum wings, erasing the bomber from the map. But in 1972, an Australian Air Force helicopter caught a metallic glint in the endless green. When ground teams finally hacked their way to the site, they found a perfectly preserved ghost. The .50 caliber machine guns still sat in their mounts. Untouched, coffee thermoses remained locked in their brackets. The suffocating mud that nearly doomed the crew had entombed the lower fuselage. This deep anoxic sludge sealed the metal away from the oxygen, preventing the airframe from rusting into dust. For decades, it remained a silent monument, until 2006. A massive salvage operation finally broke the green darkness. Heavy rigging lifted the pristine fuselage from the water, severing its bond with the prehistoric mire. For 64 years, the B-17 sat exactly where it landed. The jungle grew around it, vines wrapping the gun turrets, the mud slowly creeping up the tires. It survived flak, fighter interceptors, and a crash into an unmapped swamp, only to be preserved by the exact environment that nearly killed its crew. A silent monument to 9 men who walked into a green abyss and somehow walked out. But this was not the only immense American aircraft swallowed by a hostile environment. Decades earlier, a flying aircraft carrier fell from the sky and vanished beneath the Pacific. To follow that investigation, step into the film on your screen now.